I was a 15-year-old farm boy in Iowa. And when it broke out, of course, there was news all over the country. And then we got news that Billy Kennedy, which was a young neighbor of ours, had been killed on the battleship Oklahoma on that day. And he was a friend of ours. And it hurt me so thoroughly that I drew a picture of a Japanese on a piece of paper, and I tacked it to a cottonwood tree in the cattle yard. And I was standing at the barn door with my .22, and I filled that son of a bitch full of holes. A C-54 landed, and it taxied up close to where our maintenance guys were waiting, and we wondered what it was. Why is he there? And then we found out it was General Eisenhower during his campaign. And pretty soon, I think it was the maintenance officer came down and came into our shack, and he says, the general's got a problem. Are any of you guys know anything about propellers? And I said, yeah, I'm a prop specialist. I was trained as a prop specialist on the B-17 while I was stationed in Brazil for about 2.5 years. He said, well, would you work on the general's plane? Glad to. So they got the stands out there, and I had to pull the dome off of the general's number 3 engine and work on it and put it back on, and it was a great pleasure doing that for him. I didn't know that was going to happen. So that's my claim to fame with Eisenhower. I have to start my experience, a story of my experience in Germany, really on the 5th of April. I had just gotten there and the pilots are under training, and they were training us gunners and whatnot a little bit. And my first flight for a mission was actually on the 5th of April. And you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go have breakfast, get briefed, and then you report to your aircraft. They give you the number, and you go out to the aircraft, and everybody shows up there, and you're dressed for high altitude, naturally. Good warm undergarments, a flight suit goes on next, and then your heavy-duty gear, sheep-line trousers and jacket. And then after that, you put on your parachute harness, and that stays on you. And then the final thing you do is the flak jacket. And you don't have to do that until you start climbing out. So I left mine off, and it's handy there, and we're all ready to go. But my job, that normally they don't carry anybody in the tail on takeoff. They don't really have to. But in England, during that time of year, you can't believe how heavy the fog is. And it's you've got B-17s taking off just every few seconds. And the guy behind you, you can't even know when he's taken off, but he's behind you someplace. And the guy up ahead of you, too, is the same way. As the fog is so heavy. So my job on takeoff was flashing a red light out the back. So just in case we had to stop any place, the guy behind us, hopefully he could see us, pull off and stop too. But everything worked well, and I stayed in that position, flashing that red light, and we take off, and we're climbing out, and you still really don't know where you are because you don't know where anybody else is, any place up there. It was so thick with fog. It was just like having your eyes closed, but that's how England is part of the year. So we got up, and I got in my position and buckled in, got my flak suit on. It worked beautifully, easy to put on. I snapped 2 snaps up here, and I was ready to go. And we're climbing out, and as soon as we got up where I could see out, I looked out to my left, which is the right horizontal elevator, and I see these oil drips dripping off. And I'm not a mechanic, but I know that can't be normal. So I called the pilot and I said, "Hey, I got a little oil dripping off the elevator back here." And he said, "Okay." And then pretty soon we changed directions. He doesn't consult with me if he should or not. It's just dripping oil gives you a clue at the wrong time. And so he drops out of formation. We still can't see the rest of the planes, the rest of the formation. And we're climbing out. And now we're banking down, and they find out that there is no oil left in the engine, even to feather the prop. So now he's got to slow down really slow, and we're sinking. So we got to go back to the base, and we have a darn good navigator. Thank goodness he did his job that day, because he was saving our lives. And he was going back. We still can't see anything. Now we're back down in the fog again, but we're going back to the base. And pretty soon, by this time I'm up near the cockpit in the radio room, ready to bail out if we have to. We cannot do anything because we don't know what's down below. We can't, you can't drop your bombs unless you're over the channel. And we didn't know where we were. So we just continue on down. Pretty soon, Lieutenant Johnson was his name, the navigator, and he alerted us, and he says, "According to my calculations, the base is right there." And you could see him point his finger down, and we all liked that sign. And a hole opened up right over the base. And of course, the pilot dropped it down fast then, and we got back on the ground. My pilot was actually, the first pilot was actually flying co-pilot that day, and this was to be our first mission, so he was really an experienced man. This was to be his 25th mission, and then he was going home. So we got down on the ground, and of course now that was end of us for the day, and we just all undressed and went our merry way. And I was not a mechanic at that time, and they obviously had changed the engine. So the next morning, 3 o'clock, you wake up again, do the same thing over again, and I'm in the tail, flashing the red light, and this time we make it up into formation. And everything is working fine, but the last thing like I was telling you, the last thing you put on is the flak jacket and hope you don't need it. And so the bombardier's checking you out. Okay, he says, you put on your flight jacket now, the whole crew. We had no waist gunners because the Germans were flying only 262, the German jets. And the reciprocating, we had damaged enough of their gasoline. They weren't flying any reciprocating aircraft, fighters at all. So we were pretty safe there. And we climbed out and joined the formation just as nice as you could be. But I'm working on that flight jacket, or that flight suit, and this one stays with 2 snaps up here. And for some reason, remember, this is the same jacket I wore the day before, and these 2 snaps would not work. And I would work it. I'm right-handed, so I always left those till the last. It's just 2 simple little snaps. I thought, what the hell's going on? I can't snap it. So I take it off and lay it in my lap, and I take it. They snap good, but I can't put it on with both sides snapped. I'm in a very cramped position in the tail, and I wasn't a small. I was probably 2 inches higher than I am now, taller. But that wasn't much help. So I put it on again and tried the snaps, and it wouldn't snap. And I didn't dare say anything up front. You catch hell if you're not ready for combat. You know? And so I take it off again and try it out. I look at it, I can't figure out why doesn't it snap. It snaps here fine. And I try it again, put it back on. It won't snap. I was working so hard at doing it, and I was hearing I forget who it is, the bombardier or the navigator, calling off the temperatures inside and outside. And it was already 46 below zero inside the aircraft because there's no heat in those things. And so I'm perspiring. My chin, I sit on the seat, and my chin is probably 18 inches from the floor. And the guns are right here in front of me. And I'm really working hard to get this on, because if they find out I don't have it on, I'm going to catch hell. So I'm working hard at it. And after about 3 hours of just working at it, I finally just gave up. And I said, oh, to hell with it. And I threw the thing underneath my guns and opened it up just in case a bullet came that way, and maybe it would stop it. And then I said, well, I might as well put the chute on. Maybe that'll stop another bullet. Well, it's right up here. And that's how I went into combat. And when you get over the channel, the bombardier comes on intercom and says, okay, fire away, check your guns, make sure they're firing. And you can see down there, and you got airplanes all around you now, formation. I think there was 24 in our formation, and there was 2 formations up that day. We had separate targets. Our target was the marshalling yards in Leipzig, Germany. And so I guess that's where we were headed. And I'm still perspiring just from working with this thing. And everything was going well. I fired my guns, everything worked fine. And then you lock them down and keep your eyes open. And because we knew they were flying the 262 jet fighters, they liked to pick on the tail gunners. So I was especially alert, and of course the guys in the rest of the plane were helping me keep alert too. And so we were ready as we could be. We had like I say, we had no waist gunners that day. They couldn't follow a 262 by hand with a single 50 caliber anyhow, so they stayed back. And everything went fine. We were flying at 27,000 feet, and we went over our target and dropped. The bombardier hit the target, bombs away, and so now everybody can maybe relax a little bit, but you've got to keep watching for the fighters. And then we turned around, and we were turning right, the whole formation, to return to base. And so you know where you're going, you feel it. And on the turn, I felt a bump for some reason. It was not rough air. I had a lot of experience there, but it was just a bump. And just as the bump occurred, I heard somebody scream from up front. And I didn't know what that was, because I'm on intercom way back in the tail. And then silence. And then pretty soon there was another bump. And it felt like it was closer to me. And I figured, well, we probably hit some rough air from one of the other bombers, you know. And but then I figured, well, I tried to call somebody on the intercom, and nobody answered. So I didn't know what the heck was going on. And so I figured, well, I'm the first aid guy aboard. Maybe I better go forward and see who had the scream, what happened. So I hooked up my walk-around bottle, and I got down and started crawling forward. And I got up forward of the tail wheel, where I could see clear into the cockpit. And I could see both pilots in their position. The radio operator, he's further back. He was still at his desk. And I said, it must have been my mistake, my imagination. Everybody's okay. And so I went back to my position. And before I got there, as I approached the main system tubing, I took the walk-around off and put it aside, and I hooked up to the main system just by plugging in my oxygen mask. And then it hit me. There was no oxygen. And at 27,000 feet, you don't last long. And I say, oh, hell, this is it. And I knew there was no oxygen, and I didn't know, there wasn't anything I could do. So I just said a prayer, and my prayer was, I wish I'd written my mother. So then everything just went black, and I was prepared to die. And then I have a vague feeling of everything just coming apart. And then the next thing you know, I woke up and I'm falling, and there's no airplane around me anymore. So I thank goodness I had put my parachute on, and I never did figure out why these snaps didn't work until probably a few years later. And it was the old man upstairs. He damaged my snaps, so I couldn't see it, and that's the only thing that saved my life. If that had been snapped and I was wearing my flak suit, I wouldn't be telling the story now, because I would have gone down with the airplane. But sometime, I didn't get to see all this. The other planes in the formation, of course, they're all briefed when something like this happens, when you get back to the base. And what had happened is one of the other B-17s came down on top of us. They had lost power, or I don't know what had happened. But they came down on top of us, and it was the upper local gunner that had screamed because he saw these props coming at him and in his face. He's in the upper local position. And that was him screaming just before they decapitated him. And that's why everything went silent again. Then the thing continued on back, and it took the vertical stabilizer and rudder off. That was the second bump I felt all over my head. Of course, I didn't know that. Had no idea that was going on. And so when just before that happened, I came back to my position. Like I say, I hooked up, and I did not sit in my chair again, because you're supposed to be in the chair, and then you strap yourself in. If I had been able to do that, then I couldn't have gotten blown out. I wouldn't have survived. But I hadn't done that, and all I did was reach across and plug that oxygen into my oxygen mask. And of course, when the plane exploded and blew the tail off, it blew me out, and that's how. And it exploded at 27,000 feet. And a fighter pilot, P-51 fighter pilot escort, saw it happen. And so he saw my body come out, he told me later, saw my body come out, and he followed me down. And he realized I was sleeping. And the parachute was on my chest, but it wasn't open. So he followed me down and kept on circling me, telling me to wake up. It was funny him telling me that after I got all this went to pass. And he said, finally, I woke up at about 8,000 feet. And I looked around and, I'm out here falling, and I opened the parachute, and it worked fine. As soon as I opened the parachute, I slowed down, and here comes my tail down. I guess it was my tail. It was floating down here like a leaf, but going past me. And after I hit the ground, Germans had me, wait, damn it. They walked me past the tail section, and it had landed in a tree. So I got thinking, my golly, maybe I would have survived if I'd stayed in it, you know? Of course, the open end of the tail was pointing down, so I would hope I'd be fastened to it. But even the guns were still in there, and it survived pretty well. And the other aircraft that had caused all this, it exploded also. 5 men were blown out. 2 gunners, the tail gunner, and the bombardier was blown through the nose, right through the plexiglass nose. And he was scared to death of flying any conditions. And so he never put his parachute on before he'd get in the airplane, and he never took it off until he stepped out again on the ground. So he was just death of flying. And he was blown out and wasn't even hurt. I got with him after all this happened, and the co-pilot, he was blown out. He was, when it exploded, he was behind the co-pilot seat. I don't know why he was there, but he had no parachute on. Oh yeah, he had a parachute on. And he was blown out, and he fell. He fell, they estimate, probably 26,000 feet before he woke up. And he woke up and pulled the ripcord. He swung once, and when he came back, he swung back, he was on top of a German house. The tail gunner, he was a big man. His name was Joe Bull. I never forgot that name. Now, there's more to the story in his, and with me later I shall cover. And he also was blown out. And he was blown out, and he was unconscious. And he was falling. He woke up, and he went to pull his chute, and it was gone. And so he folded his hands, and he looked up to God to pray, because he knew he was going to die. And here's his chute up there, but it's still fastened to the risers here. So he pulls it down, pulls it, he swings once, comes back, hits the ground. Now we think he damaged his ribs and leg, either in the explosion or when he hit the ground. You could never tell because he was unconscious. So, but he survived, and he was from Houston, Texas, and he, from the moment that happened, and I met him, I didn't know him before this, and this was their 7th mission for over the targets. And but I met them now, and we were prisoners. And the first time I saw all 3 of them was they on top of a hay wagon drawn by 2 or 4 horses, I forget what it was. And they were up there on top of the hay wagon. And that was my introduction to them. We saw each other and we didn't speak to each other because that's what you're taught to do. It was all right. Nobody abused me. None of us were abused except the 2 airmen they shot. And but it was I think it was maybe a German captain in charge, and he had 4 guys with him, and they had these horses pulling the wagon, and they had about 6 German GIs following this wagon, and they had 3 guys on the top of that, and I thought they were going to let me get up there too and lay down in that nice soft straw. No, you get behind the wagon in front of these GIs and walk. I said, okay. And so we walked down a ways, and then they stopped, and the officer came back and got me, and he motioned me to come up and go up to the house, and then he says, put your hands on the house. You know, raise your hands and lean up against the house. And I thought, oh hell, this is where I get shot. So I was ready for it, and as you could get ready. And all he did was search me. No one had bothered searching me until that point. And so that sort of eased my mind, and he finally let me sit down on the step, and he was saying something to me. I don't know what it was. I don't speak German, although my name is pure German. So he put me behind the wagon again, and we marched on down the road. And we came to a river, and there's going to cross the bridge. And of course, I couldn't see the horses or what they were doing up in front of this wagon. And every once in a while, you know what they do. And because the wagon was between me and the horses, I couldn't see when it happened. And these German GIs behind me, they were getting a big kick out of this, you know. Every time those things come under the wagon and I didn't see them in time, and I had one shoe with one foot with just a sock on it, and the other one had the electric slipper or boot still on it. And so which one would step in it, Joe? And that's what made these guys laugh. I'm glad they had a good time, because it wasn't my good time. And we came to a bridge to cross this river, and just going across. Then all at once I heard someone say, "Hey, GI, what's your name?" behind me. And I looked back, and there was a guy back about 50, 75 feet, speaking perfect English. He says, "I'm from Eugene, Oregon. I got stuck over here visiting relatives." You never know when you're going to meet an Oregonian. I was on a German Luftwaffe base in jail there. And the rest of them that were still alive, they were in another cell. And you had a flat board to lay on with a little incline for a pillow at the end. And that's how we survived it. And then one day, you don't know what to do with yourself when you're in a predicament like that. And just looking out the window and seeing if there's any German pretty girls going by, you know. And pretty soon I heard outside my cell, the old man, my guard with a rifle, excused himself. He says, "I have some sad news for you." And I went over. He motioned me to come over next to the bars, and he said, "I hate to tell you this." And he speaking in broken German. And I says, "You know, what's he talking about?" He said, I'm sorry, I have to report to you that your president died today." Now, how many can tell me what day that was?
April 12th, 1945.
There you go. Eh? Very few people can do that. I always tell this story. And so that's how I found out that President Roosevelt had died that day. So, but then we went to another camp, and we had 2 guards one time. The garden, there was 5 of us, and we traveled by train once, and by truck once, and even a truck that burnt wood for fuel to move. I'd never seen one like that before. And then while they gave us a loaf of bread. It was about this big, and bread was for all 5 of us. And we were waiting at a train station to get on board a train, and we didn't like that because it was at night, and we knew that the Britons bombed trains at night, and here we are going to ride one. So, but it didn't happen, so we made out all right. But we were sitting there, just tacked, and our guards were right there, and finally I said, "Anybody want a piece of bread? Might as well eat it. I don't want to carry it just for nothing." And I said, "Oh yeah, go ahead and break it." And I put it on my knee, and it wouldn't break. So finally I'm slamming it on my knee, and it still wouldn't break. And I said, "My gosh, why is it so tough?" And finally one of the guards handed me his bayonet to cut this bread with. And so I put it down on the floor and hacked at it with this bayonet. It was about this long. And then Joe spoke a little bit of German, and they told him that it was half sawdust. But it tasted good. Anyway, we ended up at the Luftwaffe base, and then from there we were told that we were going to go to a Stalag, a regular prison of war camp. But we had to walk and march all night to get there. And one of the guys that was also a prisoner in there, we just met him, another American that had gone down sometime. And he had received a flak hit behind him, and it blew off all the flesh behind his legs, below his knees, and he couldn't walk. But he begged us to take him with us because he was afraid that he would be killed because he was crippled. So just a day before that, a P-47 pilot pulled up too late. He'd been strafing this Air Force base, German Air Force base, repeatedly, and he pulled up too late on a hill, and he pancaked in. And when the German officer got up on top of it and he opened the cockpit, he says, "We've been waiting for you." And so he was a prisoner there also, but he was in good shape. And so there's another thing. I didn't keep track of him even after we got liberated. But we carried this crippled guy. We took turns between us and on our backs, and we carried him so he would be safe. We carried him all night. And it was quite an experience. It showed you what you could survive and still smile.